Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. Guys, we're taking a look, continuing our lineup prediction series today as we take a look on the East Coast, as we take a look at your Washington Capitals. Now, the Capitals are going to be very interesting this season, so we're going to be going over their lineup in today's video. So, opening night roster for your Washington Capitals. What are we going to see? Well, let's get into it. So, the forward lines: Alex Ovechkin, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and Tom Wilson is your top line. I don't think there's really any question there. I think that's what they've gone with, and I think what we've seen with Peter Laviolette and everything that's happened there in Washington. We saw that was kind of their strength. Really, their top six was strong, and you're going to see that when we look at their second line. And even a little bit their third line. But the Washington Capitals have a deep hockey team. But again, in that Metropolitan Division, it is difficult. So we'll see what happens. But I think that's what Laviolette liked last year. And I think he's just going to go back to it this year. I don't think there's no need to change that. Second line, again, there was a little change because when Wilson got hurt. But other than that, that was pretty much it. And when he was suspended also. That's also something you got to account for. Anthony Mantha, Nicholas Backstrom, and TJ Oshie is your second line. I think that's a really solid second line. They brought in Mantha. A lot of people are still, is he good, is he not good kind of thing, but I do think he's a good player. I think Washington really likes having Mantha in there. Again, kind of continues that role of tough to play against, big power forward guy that can get in front of the net. I do like that second line a lot, and you could score some goals there. There's a lot of skill. That's a really good second line. Third line, going down in the bottom six, you've got Connor Sherry, Lars Eller, and Daniel Sprong. Daniel Sprong has kind of bounced around. He played in Hershey for a little while, but it seems like he is back in the NHL. That, again, a former Pittsburgh Penguins first-round pick. Didn't really work out in Pittsburgh, but he saw some potential to be a top six forward in the NHL, and I think, Wilson or Oshie or Mantha, he could eventually take one of those guys' spots. I mean, I think Ovechkin's pretty safe in the top six, but still, other than that, I think it is pretty wide open that Daniel Sprong's going to try and get in there. I do like Lars Eller. Again, as long as he stays healthy, really solid third line. I do really like that group. We know what Sherry did in Pittsburgh. Yeah, he's not necessarily playing the same as he did when he was with Sidney Crosby, per se, but he's still a really good player. Fourth line, you got Carl Hagelin, Nick Dowd, and Garnet Hathaway. That's a pretty interesting fourth line with Hagelin there, but Hathaway and Dowd, not easy to play against. Dowd, a very, very underrated checking, penalty-killing fourth-line center. Reminds me a lot of Casey Zizekas, or a guy that used to be in that spot, who is now in Vegas, Chandler Stevenson. So I just talked about him in our lineup predictions videos. He's actually playing first-line center based off of my predictions under Pete DeBoer. So, I think Nick Dowd is a guy that's been developing, playing his game. I know he's bounced around a little bit, but he's really found a home here in Washington. But he's going to have some competition for that center spot, because you look at the three guys that are in the depth chart for the Washington Capitals up front. It's Hendricks Lapierre, a first-round pick, I think, in 2019 or 2020. Connor McMichael, a 2018 first-round pick. And Brian Pino, who has been developing in Hershey and kind of gotten his name up to the point where people think he could get into the lineup in Washington. We saw him a little bit last year as a call-up, and I expect that to be the same for Pino this year. But I think he's expecting, in training camp, hey, I want to see if I could get on that roster and stay up in Washington. Again, the chocolate in Hershey isn't too bad, but still, I'd rather be getting, obviously paid like an NHLer, but playing in the NHL. That's really what it comes down to. So all three of those guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they start the season in the AHL, but they could be call-up guys. We've seen a little bit of all three of them over the last 2 years. We saw McMichael in the playoff bubble, Pino last year. And did we see Lapierre? Let me know down below. I don't remember if Hendricks Lapierre made the lineup or not at any point last year. All right, so with that said, looking at the blue line. Now, the blue line is honestly pretty similar to last season. It really wasn't touched in expansion. I think Seattle kind of avoided that this year, taking some of these contracts. But you got Dmitry Orlov and John Carlson as your top pair. No changes there. Second pairing as well, no changes. Michael Kempney and Justin Schultz. Nick Jensen could jump into that, taking Schultz's spot, but we'll see. I'm going with that for now. And then the third pair, you've got Trevor Van Riemsdek and Nick Jensen. I really like that defense. I think there is a lot of just, they know how to play under Laviolette. They're not necessarily on paper the best defensemen. Again, you could talk about that with even the New York Islanders. They don't have the best defensemen if you look at maybe Tampa, who just has pure skill and just a juggernaut defense. But the players in their roles under Laviolette play extremely well. And I think that's really valuable for the Caps. Again, a team that, really didn't make a lot of moves this summer. Including myself, I am doubting the Caps a little bit this year because they didn't really do anything to make themselves better, but teams like Philadelphia have gotten better. The Rangers are a lot bigger and better. So there is going to be some question if Washington can sustain themselves in that division. And I think it's going to be questionable, specifically Pittsburgh and Washington, the two juggernauts of this division at times in the when they were the Atlantic Division or the Metro Division or even the East Division. I know, a little bit of a throwback there, but Washington has been dominant since they've come into this division. I mean, I remember even in the Southeast Division, they were a very dominant team there. But this could be a little bit of a changing of the tide as teams like Carolina and the New York Islanders have kind of emerged up. Where does Washington sit this year? And you look at some of their depth defensemen, I mean, it's okay. You have Matt Irwin, bringing in some, experience there. Alex Alexiev, who we've been just waiting to see develop. When is he going to turn into that guy that jumps in and becomes a NHL regular? And Martin Fairvey, who I think we saw a little bit last year. I've seen him in Hershey. He looks like a pretty solid defenseman. Reminds me a lot of a guy we've seen before, a guy like Madison Bowie. And Lucas Johansson, brother of Ryan Johansson. I hate to throw that big B word out there, bust, but he just has not become what we hoped he would. And that's where maybe this defense is indeed hurting a little bit. So, with that said, I think the Washington Capitals, you look at their defense, their forward group is very solid. I have a lot of praise for their forward group, but their defense, I like what they've got. Again, on paper, it doesn't look it's not the most sexy defense, but they have guys in spots that they can thrive and be successful. But, depth-wise, it is a little bit of a concern. And again, you look around at the division and you're like, oh, how does Washington fit here? I wouldn't guarantee them a playoff spot. If my life was on the line, I don't know if I'd put Washington making the playoffs next season. With that said, looking at their goaltending, Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek. Yes, Vanacek left for about 5 minutes to go to the Kraken expansion draft and then got traded right back for a second-round pick. Good stuff. You got your goalie back. You don't have to worry about putting in Phoenix Copley or whoever else behind Samsonov. Lundqvist is now retired, so that didn't really work out. So you have Samsonov and Vanacek, which I think the Capitals are more than happy with. Obviously, Brian McClellan likes his group. Because of cap space and a flat cap, they didn't really have the room, even if they wanted to make moves, to add. It wasn't in the cards for them. That's kind of why they moved out Jacob Verana at the deadline, because they knew they weren't going to have the cap space, and they saw themselves in a win now. That's why they added Anthony Mantha too. So yeah, I think the Capitals, like I've been saying, again, I think Capitals fans are a little bit, questioning themselves. Do we get into the playoffs? Because they're, on paper, they do. Again, you've got probably one of the best goal scorer. Definitely the best goal scorer of my generation of watching hockey. One of the best goal scorers ever, in the category with Gretzky. But again, there's some character stuff with the Capitals, and we saw that in the bubble in 2020. Maybe not that team first mentality, which can work. It can work. We've seen it work. But how much motivation is there for guys like Ovechkin and Kuznetsov in particular? They've won their Stanley Cup back in 2018. How much drive do they have to get another one? And I think, there's been some little stuff with Kuznetsov, which I don't want to get into. That's already been talked about plenty. And I don't think it's fair to talk about that, so I'm not going to get into it. But, maybe not character issues, but maybe a little bit of a culture thing. What is the culture for the Washington Capitals? Is it very corporate business like, which I don't like too much of, but again, you're seeing success in those formats. I mean, you look at Lou Lamoriello, what he's done to the Islanders right up the road. I know Caps fans hate when I talk about them, but it is a winning formula. And so we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. I think, for the most part, I think this is a pretty set roster, but who are some of the young guys that could make the Caps lineup out of training camp? Do you see a guy like Pino or McMichael making the roster out of training camp in terms of the forward side of things? And on the blue line, does a guy like Alex Alexiev or a guy like Martin Fairvey make the lineup on the opening night roster? Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments section down below. And if you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL and more videos just like this one, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again during the regular season.